the MTGO Legacy Challenge. I'm against Araru, and they are on blue and black tempo. They choose to go first. I think they start off with a Tameo. I immediately Foxes him. I go for the Brainstorm so they can immediately transform it. We get a clue. I Smallpox knowing that they have a Daze here. This was my Daze bait, so I can try to resolve spells later in the game. You Ponder. Yep. And try to go for the Filigree Silex, but that immediately gets countered. So then I choose to play my Booger Trawler as a tapped land. Opponent casts a Flow State and gets 2 cards out of it, which is pretty good. I try to play around Daze here with my Karn the Great Creator, and it resolves. I choose to bring back the Filigree Silex, knowing that they have a board full of tokens. And it's out the Tameo when she flips, and I have to do that. But then I draw Liliana Veil, hoping that I would just move it, which it happens. But it seems like they didn't care much about the Tameo, so they ended up flashing Bowmasters in the end, because they want to remove this Karn off the board. And then I turn my Filigree Silex into a creature after resolving this Ensnaring Bridge, so I can try to protect Karn. He ends up Fatal Pushing it right away, but then I nuke his tokens. And he finishes Karn off with... Kaido. And I guess he didn't draw good after that, because I immediately resolved my next Karn, and he ends up scooping into that. So I get game 1 versus blue and black tempo. So this is game 2 against blue and black tempo. I sideboard out 4 copies of Thoughtseize because I think their deck is mostly low to the ground, and Thoughtseize does help their clock. And then I boarded out 2 Karn the Great Creators because their deck easily chokes me on mana and they can easily pressure Karn. And then the cards I boarded in were 1 Disruptor Flute, the name Kaido or Tameo, 1 Duress, to compensate for the lack of discard, just a little bit, 1 Ensnaring Bridge, keep Murktide Regent in check, and Baragoyf, a Ghost Vacuum, hopefully the answer Nethergoyf and Baragoyf, and then a Plague Engineer for their Orcs, and then a Zoran Orb so I can tutor it so I can enable Eumidian Hatchery. And unfortunately this game does not play into my favor. I kept what I felt was a reasonable hand, but my opponent was immediately able to disrupt all my early game pieces. I was wondering why they would 2-for-1 a Ghost Vacuum. So it made me think they're going to try to use something that utilizes the Great Wall. I put down a Swamp. Now I do a pretty bad play here. Instead of casting Shieldred's Edict, I go for the Takenuma to try to mill for something. When I should have just tried to cast the Shield Druid's Edict. Because I didn't get anything out of that Takenuma anyways. But I think I was trying to play around days. Doesn't really matter because they just have the Force. And here I tried to just survive long enough to get an Ensnaring Bridge. And I decided to... The reason why I made that decision is in case they had a fatal push. The reason why I played out the second Overboard is so I can cast the second Bowmasters potentially if they fatal push one of the Orcs. But I get punished for that too. I play Orcus Bowmasters here just to try to get 2 Orcs into play, but then they respond with their Orc. So they're able to connect damage with Baragloith to advance their game. And they whiff, but I then draw a Krakos. And I did not get my Ensnaring Bridge, hoping to turn the game around. So I ended up losing. And we'll go to game 3. Against Blue and Black Tempo. So what I do differently is I wanted to experiment Day of the Black Sun against Blue and Black Tempo over the Filigree Silence. And let's see how this one plays out. Alright, so with this opening hand, I didn't want to play directly into the fatal push, so I start off with the Ghost Vacuum. But then my opponent immediately Thought Seizes it, which makes me wish I tried to get it into play. But I ended up drawing a bunch of junk. I didn't want to commit the Smallpox right away because I was only going to get 1 token out of it. But my opponent unfortunately ends up ripping it out of my hand before I can get 2 Humidity and Hatchery tokens out of it, which sucks. But I didn't want to cast Smallpox in the empty board just for 1 token. I duress them, they immediately counter because they have something big to follow up with, which I am about to show you. I thought it was weird that they would -2 themselves, but it was worth the -2 to get a Kaido into play, because this Kaido is going to run away with the game. I just try to shrink their graveyard. In a turn, I try to get something with my Taka. I desperately try to get something with my Takenuma. And I get a Baragloith. But immediately met with a counter. I try to stall it a little bit with my Hatchery tokens, but my opponent removes 1. And I'm under so much pressure, I decide to triple block, just hoping to desperately draw an Ensnaring Bridge off the top, which I unfortunately do not get into, and they ended up destroying me for round 2 of the MTGO Legacy Challenge.